Hello divas, I hope you're well. Welcome back to another episode of the Other Girls Club podcast. I feel like there is just so much that I want to talk to you about today, and I've really had to whittle the subject down in my head because you know what I can get like last week. I feel like I was listening it back right when I was editing it. I feel like I made so many good points in last week's episode. But the problem with me and my brain is when I don't follow a script, I just follow threads that pop up in my head. And that can be really good. If anyone has a similar brain to me, you'll know that could be really good for discovering points that you hadn't quite thought out yet. But also, when it comes to editing content, it can be a bit of a bitch. But yes, welcome back. I hope you guys are all good. I'm absolutely buzzed today because I managed to get Hunger Games tickets today. But the main thing I wanted to talk to you guys about this week is Adolescence. I'm sure so many of you have probably seen it. If you have not, I mean, I'm sorry, this whole podcast episode is going to be about it. So you might just have to go watch Adolescence and then come back. Or if you don't mind about spoilers, just stay where you are. We're going to talk about it. Because this show has literally been everywhere. And I'll be honest, I was a little bit reluctant to start it at first because one of my friends told me about it. And as he was talking to me about it, I was a little bit like, I don't know if I want to watch that. Like, some of the things he was talking about, how, like, you know, the general, like, themes and the topics of it, I was like, it might be a little bit triggering for me. I just don't know if I can kind of, like, watch a show all about that. And then I saw them talking about it in Parliament, and I saw so many people saying, like, this is such an important conversation, it's bringing up so many different, like, topics and relevant themes, and it's going to be so important to try and, like, de-red pill like our young boys, which is a topic that you guys will know I've spoke about on here before, is like really worries me. The indoctrination of young boys on the internet is something that I have become like more aware of in the last year or so, and it's something that I find really worrying. And I'm not even like a mum. I don't know any young men actually, but I do think the topic is really worrying. And when I saw them talking about it in Parliament, I was like, right, do you know what, put my big girl pants on and let's give it a watch. And I'm so glad I did, because it was done so well. And what I was worried about was it was going to take this topic and not do it justice, and it was going to be a bit like trauma porny, if that makes sense. Like, I feel the same whenever I hear that a show or a film is going to be about a disabled person, about disability. I'm always like, oh, do I want the representation if it's like there's a chance it might not be done right? And like, that fear is so nerve-wracking. But Adolescence is done so phenomenally. I could see instantly why everyone was talking about it from the first episode, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We are going to get into the nitty-gritty of the whole series, the themes behind it, how it was made, and some of the conversations that it's starting. So firstly, to start the conversation, right, I feel like we just have to, no matter what you think about the show, whether you enjoyed it or not, you have to commend the production work on this show. Absolutely phenomenal. And I cannot remember the last time I watched a show like that. Apparently the director often films his shows in that manner. So if you guys don't know, each episode was filmed in one continuous shot. So literally from the episode start to the episode end, it is just one shot the whole way through. No stops, no scene cuts. And I'm talking like even the first episode where they travel from location to location. So when they go from the arrest of Jamie at his house, they take him obviously in that car journey in the back, they put him in the back of the police van, and then they transport him to the police station. They escort him around the police station. All of that is one continuous take, and I think it is commendable for any show to do one continuous shot, let alone when you are on location, when you're moving. That is really quite something. And to be honest, like the rest of the population, I've spent the whole week watching behind the scenes and like Q&As with Netflix and Stephen Graham and all of the people that helped create the show, who made the show, and just learning more about how this show was made, because it really is quite unbelievable. And the main thing that I noticed was it was literally choreographed and performed like a play. That got me really excited, because I don't think I've ever actually spoken about this online, but you might not know this about me. I used to be a proper little drama geek. I did BTEC Performing Arts, and it was the most fun I've ever had in my life. Not only did we put on a lot of plays, performances, like musicals, I also wrote like a couple as well. While I must have been like 16. I remember when I was 16, I wrote a Batman musical. 16 years old, I not only starred in, I helped co-wrote a Batman musical at school. Yeah, I feel like when you learn that about me, a lot of my behaviour makes sense. You guys listening right now, you're going to have a click moment in your brain. You're going to go, right, that makes sense. But I was a proper little drama geek, and that's one of the first things I noticed about this show, is that it was choreographed like a play. And while obviously filming every episode in one continuous take is a lot of strenuous work on the crew, particularly the cameramen. Oh my god, have you guys seen all of the like behind the scene footage where it's them showing you how they filmed each shot? It's phenomenal, honestly. Like the patience and like choreography you have to have with each other on the set, and the connection you have to have with everyone on that set must be so phenomenal. But even though it makes it 10 times harder, I think, probably filming an episode like that, it brings so much power to the piece. Because there is a massive difference between watching TV and film and watching a theatre. And I feel like when you have a show like this, you kind of merge the two worlds, and it really creates for interesting drama. And I personally feel like what it did here was it gave all of the actors the power, because they had the room, they had the stage, and it is different from when you're performing theatre. You have the audience in the palm of your hand, and that's kind of what the actors were given here. And I feel like you obviously, when you have like normal TV shows and films and stuff like that, you can improvise and you can hold a room and hold the camera. Yes, of course you can, but there is an even like added tension and added element to it here when it's filmed in this way. And I feel like one good example of improvisation was where Jamie's character in episode 3, he yawns, and that was improvised. And I feel like that is a good example of someone holding the audience in the palm of his hand. We're going to get onto him in a bit. That actor, absolutely incredible young man. But it also just suits the themes and the pacing of this show, because it's not a regular show. There is so much tension, there is so much emotion. The stakes of what we are addressing in that show are so high. So to have the production match that, it really helped to convey that the stress and the urgency of the matter. And also, not only were the crew behind the camera absolutely phenomenal and really just did so much to make that show so incredible, the actors, oh my god. Obviously Stephen Graham, I didn't realise as well he actually wrote the show or co-wrote it. It's like his show, that phenomenal writer. And his acting was just sensational, like so emotional, so believable. And I feel like we watched him go through so much, and it felt just like such a believable performance. I could really feel like his pain and everything that he was battling with while he was like processing something like that. But that final fight, I was going to say scene, but it's all one scene, but that final shot, shall we say, that final line where he says, he tucks the teddy bear into bed and he says, I'm so sorry, my son. And he says, he tucks the teddy bear in and he kisses the teddy bear. I was crying my eyes out. I really was. And it comes off the back of, we're going to get into the themes and stuff in a bit, but coming off the back of that emotional episode where he is blaming himself and he's asking, how did this happen? How did this happen? I thought he was safe in his room. Oh my God, because I cannot even comprehend what it must be like as a parent to find out and come to terms with the fact that your kid has done something like that. It's such a life-changing event for everyone involved, and I feel like the show really tackled that well. It showed you how that incident has really impacted everyone in Jamie's life, and how everyone in Jamie's life played their role within it happening. And then you've got Jamie himself. Oh my God, that boy. I don't know how old the actor is, but obviously he's playing a 13-year-old. I suspect he might be older. Let me fact check. Owen Cooper, his name is. Okay, he's 15, so wow, not that much older. For a 15-year-old boy to take on that role, first of all, is quite like a mental toll. To take that on and to do it such justice. To approach it with, I think, the layers and the nuance of which he did, because I feel like the way that he portrayed it and the way that he did that performance, he must really understand the material, and he must really understand the topic, which in and of itself is a really big thing, because the themes and the topics of this show are so hard to grasp for me as like a fully grown adult. Like, I'm nearly 30 and still reconciling that this is a very big problem within our society. And then for a 15-year-old boy to go, this is a really big problem in our society, it's impacting a lot of kids like me, to take on that material and to perform it in such a nuanced way, in such an emotional, powerful way, That is a very, very talented kid. And in episode 3, that was the first episode they'd ever shot. And that was his first time ever being on the TV set. Like, if you have seen that episode, you will know that it's probably one of the best, at least in terms of Owen, the kid's performance. It's probably his best performance throughout the whole show. And to that to be the first time he'd ever gone on a TV set, and it's not like he's, you know, doing little scenes and they're wheeling him in and stuff like that. No, that is like what, 50 minutes or more of continuous acting, continuous in character. That's not just, you know, remembering your lines and stuff like that. That is thinking about the choreography of the womb. Thinking about the choreography of the room. That was a bit of a Freudian slip, wasn't it? Thinking about the choreography of the room and thinking about feeding off of your screen partner and just everything. And the material that they get into in that episode is really, really dark. It's probably one of the darkest points in the series, I would say. Just what a talented boy, and I'm so excited to see what he does next. I've heard he's going to be in Wuthering Heights, which oh god, there's a load of controversy around that this week as well, but I've just not got time to get in it. But let's just say it's not looking good, comrades. It's not looking good. Another thing which I thought made the show so well produced was how each episode was carefully constructed and how the series was carefully constructed as a whole to get the message across. Because that takes a lot more work and a lot more skill than I think what some people realise. And I think especially when you've got a show like this, a story like this, where you want to get to the point, you want to leave no room for ambiguity, you don't want to leave it up to interpretation, you've got something to say and you want to get your point across. To be able to do it that concisely and with that much of a punch really, really takes so much skill, so much talent. And I feel like the way that they shot it in one continuous shot every episode probably really helped with that, because there was not a 0.5, half a second to waste on that set. Every single second on that set had to count. There had to be a reason for every single millisecond on that set. Every part of the script had to be for a purpose. And I think that is probably what made the way that they filmed it work so, so well. Now I'm sitting here bigging it up, like, you know, because I loved it, of course. And there are so many people, don't get me wrong, around the country and around the world. I think it's like the #1 global global TV show on streaming, or at least on Netflix, this week and the last 2 weeks. But there are a lot of people who don't like it. And it has particularly garnered a lot of hateful responses from, shall we say, like far-right figures. Surprise, surprise. And look, let me just say, you are allowed to not like things. You are allowed to not find things entertaining, or you are allowed for things not to be your taste. This is not me sitting there going, well, no, this is amazing and you're wrong if you didn't enjoy it, you didn't like it. I think you have to commend the skill and the talent that went into creating it, because I think that's undebatable. But I don't think everyone has to like everything. But the reasons that I've seen people give for not liking this show and not liking the messaging of this show have been of a very clear undertone and of a very clear, like, ulterior messaging, because the show is essentially about young boys being indoctrinated into far right spaces and figures like Andrew Tate and the Manosphere and the problems that it's giving our young boys and what it is contributing to. And Stephen Graham himself even said it's not based off one particular case. He said that there were, the week that he was writing it, or the week that he got the idea for it, there were 2 different stabbings at 2 different ends in the country of very, very young boys, teenagers stabbing young girls. And it made him stop and think, what is going on? Because it is a problem right now, and violence against women has been a problem since the dawn of time. Like, we all know that. But we are in a very, very tense time right now where we are seeing boys get younger and younger, filled with more and more hatred for women. And that is coming from somewhere. Because look, just being really, really candid, I was quite surprised that people were so surprised that this is a really big problem in our society right now, because I think it's blatant to see on the internet, but also because, like, even from my experiences when I was at school, got to remember, I'm 29 now, and when I was 13, the age of the characters in this show, there were boys in my school who just hated women. They did. They hated the girls around them. They saw them as something that they could use. They saw them as property. They didn't respect them. And it was a similar sort of mentality to what you see Jamie harbour in this TV show. So the issue has not come out of nowhere. It's not just come with Andrew Tate. What the massive problem is that Andrew Tate has this huge platform, and he's been able to tap into a misogyny in young boys, and he's been able to tap into a vulnerability and a tipping point in young boys, which has always been there. And it's always been there because it was there when I was at school. And I remember the boys at my school, they used to terrify me. Honestly, of everything I've ever been through in my life, like, you know, like I went through an abusive relationship with my mother. I've become paralysed. I've been through some really, really scary things and awful things in my life. But I don't think there was anything ever more scary than being 13 and being around other 13-year-old boys. And I genuinely mean that. And I've tried to unpack a lot of the things that I'd experienced or that I'd seen happen when I was 13, and, you know, being at that age in school and being around boys that are coming of age and boys that are growing into men. I've tried, I don't even think I've scratched the surface of what living through that is like. And if that's what it was like 15 years ago, I can only imagine how much more scary it is getting for younger and younger girls. I can only imagine. Because I grew up in a time where things were, you thought they were getting better, they thought they're getting progressive. So when I was 13, it would have been 2009, 2010. So that was kind of an age where we thought things were getting progressive, you know? So I can only imagine what it is like for younger girls now, girls who are 13. But just addressing some of the things that I've seen people say, because I think it's really good to take on these arguments head on, and to debunk what people are saying, because some of the comments I've seen is just ridiculous. A lot of what I've seen is, oh, why did they race swap the characters? Because a lot of people are referencing the Southport murders of those young girls at the Taylor Swift dance party, which, by the way, absolutely abhorrent, just disgusting. But what the confusion is that this is not a retelling of that crime. What this is this show is talking about the culture where young boys are becoming more and more violent and more aggressive to young girls. But people have latched on to that crime and are saying, oh, well, they've race swapped the characters, so the killer should actually be black. And it's unbelievable that this skinny, you know, little 13-year-old white boy would be the face of knife crime. And it's like, if you generally think that this TV show was made with the purpose of addressing the problem of knife crime in this country, you did not pay close enough attention to the TV show. I'm sorry, because this TV show is not about knife crime. It's just not. It is about misogyny and young boys becoming indoctrinated. Yes, the weapon of choosing for Jamie was a knife, but the show is not about knife crime. Another thing I've heard people say is, oh, it was disappointing because I wanted to know if he really did it, or, you know, who did it. And this is what I mean when I say, with peace and love, about how some people just misunderstand some things on purpose, or how people will quite happily neglect information that is served up to them on a plate. Because in episode 1, by the end of episode 1, it is without a shadow of a doubt that Jamie murdered Katie. Because you are literally shown video evidence of him doing it. It is unrefutable. Is that a word? Unrefutable? It's without refute. It is without argument that Jamie did this. And I feel like they made a very, very clear point of doing this in episode 1, because the show is not meant to be a whodunit. It's not a murder mystery. It is talking about, as we've said before, the issue of young men becoming indoctrinated into misogyny. So we don't want to distract that point with, oh, did Jamie do it? Who did it? Who murdered Katie? It's not a whodunit story. And it purposely served that very key information of who murdered Katie. Yes, it was Jamie. It served that very key information of Jamie actually murdering Katie with unrefutable video evidence in the first episode, so that you as a viewer would go, oh my God, now why would he do that? That's meant to be your next question, because you're sitting there thinking, oh, he purposely couldn't do that. He couldn't do that. A 13-year-old boy could never do that. But you're given evidence that he did. The next question you're supposed to ask is, why did he do that? And that is the point of the rest of the show. The whole entire show, that is the point. And I feel like they do such a good job in that first episode of really showing Jamie's age, of really showing how young he is, that you really feel his adolescence. You really feel like just how young and really quite vulnerable himself is, because at the end of the day, Jamie is a very, very young boy. He's a 13-year-old boy, and I feel like by showing him this way in episode 1, with him wetting himself when the police come into his bedroom, with him crying for his dad, with him not knowing what to do, with him being scared, all of that stuff is to illustrate just how young this boy is. It's to get that message across to you that these young boys who are still children are being indoctrinated into doing this very, very violent acts. They're being indoctrinated into this hatred. That's the point it's meant to get across to you, is that these are babies, these are children, and they are being taught to hate, and they are being taught violence. And I feel like they portray him that way with his youth and with his adolescence and with his naivety in episode 1, and it's such a stark difference to the Jamie we see in episode 3, but we'll get onto that in a bit. Episode 2, obviously we don't actually see Jamie in episode 2. It goes on to the school, which, oh my God, I felt so sorry for that actor. I was going to say cop then, we don't call them cops over here, do we? The policeman, the detective I think he was, who had to chase that boy, is it Ryan? Had to chase him out of the school. That must have been a bugger of a shot. Like, when he was out of breath in that scene, oh my Christ, I don't think he was acting. I think that was 100% genuine. He was fucked off in that shot. But going back to what I said about earlier about how the show was constructed in such a perfect manner of making use of the time and getting the message across and answering that question of why has this happened, because that's the question you're meant to be asking when you find out Jamie has murdered another 13-year-old girl. So you have episode 1, which shows you the what has happened, and then the rest of the series is really deconstructing that why. And I thought it was really important that in episode 2 they showed school, and they showed the culture, and they showed the attitudes and the behaviours of other people's Jamie's age. And I also saw a TikTok as well of some girl watching it. She was British, and I think her partner was Australian, and he was watching it and he was like, are British secondary schools actually like that? And she was like, yeah, what do you mean? And he was like, it looks awful. And he was like, not just the way the school looks like in terms of the building and stuff, although it does look quite prison-y. He was like, why is it so tense? Why is everyone so angry? And do you know what? Watching it, I had such flashbacks to what my secondary school was like, and it was awful. It was hell and horror in there, babes. Like, even on my worst days now, I remind myself, you will never ever have to go back to secondary school ever again. Honestly, if I had to pick between reliving the day that I became paralysed and reliving an average day at secondary school, I would pick the day I became paralysed. You would never ever, for the love nor money, get me back in secondary school. Never ever. But the culture of secondary school in the UK and the friendship groups of these 13-year-old boys was such an integral part to the story. And it is in this part of the story where obviously the dad, the policeman, has a son at the school. And that's where he actually explains to him about the emojis and what they mean, and how he actually kind of breaks the ice on this is about incel culture, the manosphere. And he explains the 80-20 rule, which is apparently something Andrew Tate preaches, where apparently only 80% of women are attracted to 20% of men. I would love to see where he got his study and his figures and his stats on that, because that don't sound like it backs up to me. And also, by the way, I had no idea that the different coloured hearts have different meanings. I had no idea. The only one that I use kind of purposefully is the purple heart, when I'm like, who's this diva? And kind of like hung culture. That's what I use the purple heart for. But I had no idea that like the youth. Oh my god, I'm aging myself. But I had no idea that like teenagers were using different coloured hearts with different meanings. And now I'm overthinking every emoji that I'm using. Because we've always had like emoji culture. And we've like, I remember having to explain to my dad what the fucking aubergine emoji was. Oh my god, I was horrified. I was like, Dad, you can't use that emoji. So that's an aubergine. I was like, no, it's not. No, you can't use the peach either. No, you can't use the raining emoji, Dad. Oh my Christ. When will they learn? But I had no idea that was going on. And the way that this boy has to explain it, and he has to explain the nuance of something as simple as an emoji to his dad, who is a detective. I think the show really is illustrating that point of how the people and the structures and the systems that have got the resources and the power to help alleviate and solve these problems, like we see highlighted in this show, like misogyny, like violence against young girls, like the indoctrination of young boys, they are not clued up enough, and they are not tapped in enough to the culture of these young people to use those resources, to even begin to understand where this is all coming from. And yes, everyone talks about how there needs to be better education for young people to stop them getting indoctrinated and to de-red pill them and stuff like that. But there also has to be an education for older people, and I'll include myself in this, older people who to understand what is going on within these spaces. Episode 3 was my favourite episode of the show. It was so tense, and as I said before, I think this is where we see the real Jamie come out. This is where we see his behaviour change completely, and I feel like it's not until this episode where we really see his thoughts, feelings and behaviour towards women, and we really see the driving motivation behind his crime here. And there were so many points of this episode where I was just like, gasp. The one line which really stopped me in my tracks was the where about how he thought she would have been an easier target, or she would have been more willing to date him because she had just been humiliated, and he saw that weakness and he thought he could use it to his advantage. And then when he said something along the lines of, oh, I didn't touch her, well, after he killed her, he's making a point of saying, I'm better than the others. There are other people that would have assaulted her in that way after killing her, but I'm different, and that makes me better. And you can really see that this is the point where the psychologist just looks at him, and I think that's when everything clicks into place, because we know that's her 5th visit with him, and we know that she's looking down so many different avenues. She's doing her job and she's doing it well, and she's looking for so many possible answers as to why a boy of this age would commit a crime like this, what would lead him to do this. And I think that really is the moment where it clicks, and then she says, Jamie, this will be our last session. And the fear, disgust in her eyes in that room in that moment, her acting, phenomenal. I know obviously we've bigged up the actor of Jamie, rightly so, but the actress who plays that therapist did such an amazing role to convey so much through her eyes, I think, because in her character, obviously she's staying very professional, very calm, so she might not express so much emotion through her dialogue and through her physicality, but I think you can see it all within her eyes. And that really takes a fine skill of acting, because I think of that as like acting with your fine skills rather than your motor skills almost. But the way that he spoke to the therapist throughout this episode, and also the way that he just spoke about women in general, it left no room for argument as to what his motivations were. And I feel like them making a point of saying this is the therapist's 5th visit, her being very thorough in her questioning, her asking all different types of questions, trying to learn more about the dad and if he'd ever abused Jamie, which we know he didn't. Her being so thorough was giving every opportunity for there to be a plausible explanation for Jamie to have done this for any reason other than the fact that he had been indoctrinated into hating women. Something else I noticed as well, Jamie in that episode has such a fixation on trying to get her approval and trying to get her to say that he is not ugly and that she doesn't think he's ugly. He is really leading her every and each way to get those words out of her. And commendable to this character, right? She's fucking good at her job and she will not give it to him. And she keeps saying, I'm more interested in why that's interesting to you, right? Because that is her job. Because why would she have opinions on how attractive a 13-year-old boy is? This is a full-grown woman. She does not think of a 13-year-old boy in that way. But in his head, I think it really did well to illustrate how the manosphere and how these Andrew Tate and people like him really get to young boys, and they really get hate into them by just beating them down and beating their self-esteem down, because he's clearly got very, very bad self-esteem issues, but he is taught that the answer to that, or the problem with that, and the reason behind that is because of women and because of how bad women are. Which is just, I mean, the whole thing is crazy to me, because girls also go through this. Girls have always been going through this. Like, the thoughts and horrors that go through a 13-year-old girl's head every time she looks in the morning, and every time she has to get dressed every morning, every time she looks in the mirror, unimaginable, right? Absolutely unimaginable, the horrors that go through a 13-year-old girl's head. And yet, girls don't grow into women who kill. Largely, of course, we know. Look at the stats, right? Girls don't grow into women who kill. We internalise all of that. We take that upon ourselves. We don't put that onto other young boys. We don't put that onto men. We don't kill men. That's the... And this is the thing that really fucks me off when people say about how misandry is just as bad as misogyny. First of all, misandry doesn't exist. But also, if it did, if you want to talk about misandry being a concept that you think it is, women might laugh at men, but men kill women. And we're getting to the point now where boys are killing girls. That is terrifying. But yeah, I thought episode 3 was particularly fantastic. Probably my favourite one in the series, because I think it really did so much to illustrate a lot of the points and a lot of the problems and the themes of the show. And I just think it did it in such a fantastic way. And then finally, obviously, we have episode 4, which is all about the family, and the impact that this had on the family. And not only the impact that it had on them of the consequence of his actions, but also the parents trying to reconcile with... There's even a line in there where the mum says, I think it might be good for us to say that we could have done better, and that we did take our finger off the pulse a little bit. And that's such a brave thing to admit, because it would be so easy to say, well, you know, we never hit our kids, we never did this, we never abused them, we raised them right, we did everything we could. It's so easy to say that. I cannot imagine, and obviously I'm talking about fictional characters here, but I cannot imagine the strength it would take for a parent to have to turn around and say, maybe I could have done more. That is unfathomable. Unfathomable. And I thought the rapport between the Stephen Graham, and I don't know the actress's name, I'm sorry, but the rapport between the actors who played the parents here was absolutely phenomenal, and learning more about the impact it's had on them and their role in Jamie's lives, and also seeing the sister as well be so impacted by it. And you also, in very subtle ways, see more about Jamie's dynamic with more than just his dad, because we've learnt throughout the show from episode 1 that he clearly has so much respect for his dad, wants to be near his dad, gravitates towards his dad, obviously, but that's quite normal for young boys, right? But I think in this episode they very, very subtly show you how he's very dismissive of his mum and his sister. Like in episode 3, where I think the only nice thing he can say about his mum is that she does a good roast. She makes a good roast, and other than that, he's quite dismissive of her. And even when he's talking about his sister being clever, it's in quite a snide way, and in quite a resentful way. But then the second he finds out that it's not just him and his dad having that conversation, that his mum and his sister were also in the van as well, he completely shuts down and dismisses the conversation. Because really, he only wants to talk to his dad, and he only wants to hear what his dad's got to say about the matter. It's his dad that he's worried about upsetting. Another thing that I thought they did throughout the show, but particularly episode 4, was, whether this was intentional or not, I'm sure it probably was, considering how well crafted the show was, they did a very, very good job at showing how often women in households play the role of emotional regulators, whether that is the mother or whether that is the daughter. Particularly, it's an elder daughter thing. I know I have I have lived a life of being the emotional regulator in the household, but women do take on this role and it is a laborious job. It is a mentally draining job, to emotionally regulate the mood of your household. And you see the mother and the daughter do this throughout this episode. They do it throughout the show where you see them, but we see more of them in this episode, where they are trying to regulate the dad's mood and trying to get the day back, and as they say, and they're trying to calm him down and to de-escalate the situation. And there are so many women up and down the country who are in situations which are not abusive, that are not as dramatic as this, that are not as high stakes as this, but still play the role of emotional regulator in their household. And look, I grew up with an abusive mother, so I know that it's not all women. I know that better than anyone. But I remember when I was like 15 and my parents are getting a divorce, and I very much played the full-time role of emotional regulator in my household. And the impact that has on particularly young girls who have to take on that role at such a young age, it really impacts you, and it really instills you with a lot of anxiety and a lot of nerves. I find now, as I'm getting older, I've noticed how much of a nervous disposition I have, and I never thought of myself as being a nervous person, but it's only now that maybe because I'm in such a safer space in my life that I'm noticing how many areas and elements in my life where I do have such a nervous disposition. And I look back at certain points in my life and I'm like, well, yeah, of course you have a nervous disposition. Look at the environment that you learnt to survive in. Look at that. Of course that's going to make you nervous. But I thought that was very interesting for episode 4. Whether that was intentional or not, I thought that was very, very, very well done. Another thing in episode 4 that I noticed and it made me sick, actually probably I thought one of the standout moments of the show was when Stephen's character, the dad, goes to buy the paint, and you have one of the boys in there, the workers, who clocks him as being Jamie's dad and blah, 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 blah. And he basically instantly goes with, like, oh, we support your son. We know he didn't do it. And he starts refuting the evidence of the video evidence of the murder and starts saying things like, oh, well, we all saw that picture of her, and starts victim blaming her and then saying the evidence was fake and that the stab wounds were fake. And it was so reminiscent of a lot of the behaviour and a lot of the mentality you see online, where there are people that are so far indoctrinated into far-right ideology and people that have been so programmed into this way of thinking that misinformation is rife, yes, but also when you present them with true, cold, hard facts, video evidence in this case of a murder, they do not take it as truth. And this is what I was saying about earlier, about how there are so many people who will purposely misunderstand. And that's because they are so programmed, they are so into their way of thinking, that they will happily deny stab wounds right in front of them. And I thought the show did a very, very, very good job at presenting that. And you can see the disgust in the dad's face as he's saying it, because the dad isn't one of these thinkers. The dad, and you know what? We'll have the conversation about, whether the dad was a good dad. Yes, he was. I think he was a good dad. I really do. But that's what the show was saying. The show was saying that these young boys aren't necessarily always coming from, bad parenting, abusive parenting. They're being indoctrinated on the internet in their rooms where their parents think they're safe. Their parents think that they're maybe doing all they can, or that they don't need to do more, they don't need to act in certain ways or prevent certain things and intervene on certain things because they think they're safe in their bedrooms. It doesn't make them bad parents. I don't think Jamie's parents were bad parents. Maybe you guys might disagree. I've seen some people saying about why were the kids out that late? But look, we were all 13 once. You're telling me you never snuck out at 13? We all have. We all did. But you don't think your kid is going to sneak out at 13 and stab another 13-year-old 7 times, do you? I don't think Jamie's parents were bad parents. And I think the thing that really solidified it for me was how horrified the dad was by Jamie's actions. He was absolutely disgusted. And when that boy said that in front of him, you could tell he just didn't know what to do. He couldn't even look at him. Another father-son relationship dynamic in the show that I thought was really, really interesting was that of the detective and the young boy who's at the school. And I thought that was interesting that they had that dynamic in there, because it was very, very clear in episode 2 that dad has a wake-up call, that he needs to be more proactive, and he needs to find out more about these spaces, but also his son's relationship to them. And it's after his son has explained to him about the emojis and about the manosphere and about Tate and all of that stuff, Andrew Tate and all that stuff, the dad kind of has this realisation of, are you involved in that? Is that affecting you? And I think he has that realisation where, shit, I need to be less passive and more proactive in my son's life, and I need to have more of a relationship with him where he can have a man that he can come to. Because at the beginning of the show, you see him saying like, oh, the mum will deal with it, he knows I'm a soft touch, blah, 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 and being quite content with kind of taking a back seat. And that might not be because malicious intentions, that might be because, you know, work's busy. I mean, he's a detective, he's a police officer, but either way, I think he recognised very quickly that he needs to change that behaviour. And it's specifically after he's caught Ryan, after he's found out more about this case, and after he's found out more about the manosphere, that he says to his son, get in the car, we're going to go for food. And I'm seeing more and more TikToks since this has come out about people talking about how they're having these conversations with their young boys, having these conversations with their sons and their daughters, but primarily their sons, obviously. And they're talking about how they're having to learn how to navigate these issues that I guess we just never thought we would. And this is why I think this show is so important, because it has started a national, if not international, conversation about these topics, which are so relevant and so important, and the stakes are so high. Like, the lives of women and young girls are at stake here. And I know Starmer, who, I'll be honest, is my mortal enemy number one right now, he has spoken about how the show has shocked him to the issue, and how I think either he or someone else in Parliament said he thinks it needs to be shown in schools. And I think that could be a good thing, but it's not enough. I think, as well as, you know, having this piece of media start a conversation, yes, we also need to have more conversations about intervention and equipping people like teachers, like parents, with resources and with action plans of how to deal and how to handle these conversations with their kids. Because I'll be honest, I don't think teachers are equipped enough to deal with this. And I don't mean that as a dig at teachers. I mean that with heartfelt empathy for teachers. If I cannot imagine what it is like to be a teacher in these days. I cannot imagine what it is like to be a teacher these days and having to deal with these issues and having to deal with this very specific manosphere Andrew Tate issue. It's not fair on teachers to have to deal with these issues, but teachers could play an absolutely integral role in helping alleviate this issue. But that means that teachers need to be properly equipped with the resources and with the information and the education and the support system and the contacts on how to deal with this issue. So yeah, I think showing it in schools could potentially be a good thing, but only if it's then going to be backed up with resources and information on what do we do about the issue further. And then there's the further issue of this is all happening because of the patriarchy. So we need to continue to dismantle the patriarchy. Like, nothing is going to change until we do that. But yeah, you might help alleviate this particular issue, but the patriarchy will always rise in other ways. We need to be stricter on figures like Andrew Tate. We need to have more reinforcements on our media platforms. We need to ask the question of, why are young men falling into these spaces where there is so much right-wing ideology? There's so much more to it than showing the film in schools. I think it could be a good start, but it is just a start. But all that being said, I was going to say, if you've not seen the show, go watch it. But I imagine if you've listened this far, you probably have watched it. If you haven't, and you've just sat here and think, oh, it's been spoiled for me now, honestly, go watch it. Because even if you know what happens, this is not a show where it's kind of about the plot. This is a show where it's about the messaging and all of the little details and nuances of it. And also, it is just such a feast for the eyes to see this come to life, shot the way it was. So even if you haven't seen it, go see it. It'll put it on this weekend. It is incredible. I would recommend maybe not binge watching it, because, look, don't get me wrong, I love a good binge watch. This was a little bit too heavy for me to binge watch, so I think I watched it over like 3 days, or maybe 2 days. I think I did 2 and 2. Yeah, 2 episodes and 2 episodes next day. My personal recommendation for you, if you value my opinion at all. But I thought it was incredible, and I'd love to know what you guys think. I'd love to know if it started any conversations in your household. I know that my family have watched it, so I'm definitely going to be talking to them about it this weekend. I don't think my dad knows a lot about like Andrew Tate and stuff, so I'd love to know like his thoughts on it, because yeah, it's really wild to me, because all the male figures in my life are so far from this issue, and that's a really, right now I'm realising, a very, very lucky, privileged position to be in. But it is people like my dad who are watching this show and not just going, oh, it's nothing to do with me. They're watching this show and going, wow, we need to do something about this, and who are prepared to be, you know, a face of alternative masculinity, I guess. I think that's really important right now, and I spoke about that in my podcast episode with David Larbury. That was a lovely conversation, so I'll link that in the description below if you haven't seen that one. But yeah, other than that, guys, I want to know, comment something you loved about the show. What was your favourite scene? What was your favourite thing about it? Has it started any conversations in your household? What do you think would be a perfect next step after this has like had such a big impact on everyone watching it? And if there was any moments in the show that I missed, because there was so much, I had notes on my phone to go through when I was like making this episode, but even then I know I've definitely missed some things, so let me know some really other important parts of the show that I've definitely missed. And ending the episode in the way that we always do, asking myself, how am I chasing joy this week? And I feel like after the issues we've spoke about today, we need to speak about some joy. So let me tell you, I'm going to Paris for the day, actually. The day after tomorrow, me and my uncle, who is my dad's brother, we are going to Paris literally just for the day. We're getting the train in the morning. We're going to see the Notre Dame since it's reopened, because we both really want to go. But yeah, I think when the last time I went to Paris at the end of the summer, it was literally just a few months off reopening. So we're literally just going to go the day. We realised it was cheaper and quicker to get to Paris on the train than it is to get to Manchester. That is absolutely wild. But yeah, it should just be a lovely day if everything goes planned, everything goes smoothly. Fingers crossed for me. But obviously as well, I'd love to know how you guys are chasing joy. Let me know whether that's in big or small ways. I want to know how you're chasing joy this week. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would love if you would leave the podcast a review, if you wouldn't mind rating us. Podcasts literally thrive and survive off reviews and ratings, so I really, really appreciate it a lot. Don't forget to subscribe and follow the podcast so you never miss another episode. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and leave a comment. Other than that, I wish you guys a lovely, happy week, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye!